Hello, this is David Cross, your historical expeditionary from indispensableleadership.org. And I guess today's the second episode of how to thrive through the corona crisis. The idea here is don't just look at this as something you need to survive. Look at what you can get out of it. And if you're asking me, well, how on earth can you look at it that way? We don't learn from our successes and our easy times. We learn from our challenges. This is going to teach us all about ourselves. It's going to teach us about ourselves as a country, and it's going to teach us all about ourselves personally. And a lot of people, and I'm getting a lot of emails from people who are in full panic mode. And that's perfectly understandable. I know people who are in the top percent, who have their private planes, and they're looking at, wow, this is yet another opportunity to make a lot of money if you know how to do the stock market and get out and get in when it's on the bottom and all of that. And then I know people who are in the middle and down the bottom of the economic world, and from the middle down to the bottom, it is a question of month to month, day to day, week to week right now. That's how Americans live. Most Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. So it's a difficult time, no question about that. But the question you need to ask yourselves in terms of this immediate difficulty is, are you doing everything you personally can do to meet your obligations? Doesn't mean you're meeting your obligations. That may be impossible right now. And that's just how it is. And you're just going to have to go through day to day and understand that this is a national crisis. And for those of you who are the type of people who feel like just real losers when they're not bringing money in or whatever, just look around, all right? And just think about the people who are in worse situations. People who may have greater have to pay more money each month for their business, people who are really, really stuck and in worse trouble than you are. And if you're one of those people stuck and in bad trouble, all I can say is this is a world crisis and the normal rules don't apply. And so do what you can do. Make the changes you can make the payments and pay the obligations you can pay. And other than that, people are just going to have to understand. And whether they do or not is beyond your control, really. So panic is not a useful way of feeling about this. What I would advise you to do is look at this situation and figure out what you can learn from it. And I saw a Washington Post article today, and it wrote about Sir Isaac Newton, and it was during his time off of work during the plunge pandemic that he was able to make many of his greatest discoveries, and really the beginnings of his great discoveries on gravity and on other things. And so my question to you is, what are you going to use this time for? Are you going to use it to watch The Sopranos twice? Or are you going to discover something? Are you going to discover something about yourself? A lot of people out there have not been happy at work. You've been going to work. You're glad, especially right now, that you had that work and you had that money coming in if you're not having it right now. But use this time to figure out, well, what can I do to get closer to my calling? If I sound like a broken record, there's a reason. That's the first step for any level of success in leadership, is finding your calling, finding out what you're supposed to be doing. And this is a time where you can do that. I personally, my leadership conferences in the near future have all been canceled. People obviously aren't meeting up. And so I'm going to be looking at those, redeveloping them, making them better, working on some of the audio packages that I offer, working on my long-term trips for some of my tours, just really trying to make things so that whenever this ends, whenever the world is quote unquote normal again, I'm going to be that much better. What can you do to do that? What can you do to get closer to what your calling truly is? Because until you find that, until you're a part of your calling, you're not going to be successful. You're not going to be happy. And that's when you're going to feel things like stress. I mean, this is a stressful time, right? Everybody loves to talk about stress. I love the fact that people love to brag about how much stress they have. And usually it's the people with the least amount of stress. Like everyone in law school whined about feeling stress. And really, when I look back and I look at all the years after my life in law school, I see that as one of the least stressful times of my life, really. You know, stress really hits when you have to pay a mortgage. Stress really hits when you have to make a living, when you have to find work, when you have to create wealth. That's what so-called stress is. But the problem with that word is it, to me, implies that life isn't supposed to be hard, that life is supposed to be easy. And so, especially the young people I know, they're always, stress, stress in high school, stress in high school. Well, there's levels of difficulty in every field of life, but stress is really how you view the things you have to do. I found a book that I've read it a long time ago. Maybe I'll read it again. Let's see if you can see it. Here you go. It's called Kelly McGonigal's book. She's the author, The Upside of Stress, Why Stress is Good for You and How to Get Good at It. In other words, if you're going to have any life of meaning, you're going to have what we call stress. That's a fact. And when I look at my life, it's the moments of great stress where I was at the top of my game. I can remember when I would be in the middle of a jury trial, I felt like Superman. I mean, I needed less sleep. I had more strength. And stress is something that you could welcome. Now, it drives me crazy when I see movies, historical movies, that presume leaders were going around whining about stress the way a lot of us do. I stopped watching, what's the show on the Turn? Thought it was a pretty good first season. In the middle of the second season, George Washington just starts having night sweats and he's having panic attacks. And that's fine if it's true. It's just not true. What did he feel in his heart? What did he feel on his head? We'll never know. Obviously, he's not inhuman. He knows that there's difficulties. He's got more of what you would call a stressful life than anyone else I can ever even imagine. Him and Lincoln, when you want to talk about how to deal with so-called stress, look at Lincoln, look at Washington. But we look at these people too often in terms of people who make these movies, and we try to paint them in modern terms of how we might feel. So this was an episode where Washington couldn't sleep and he bonded with his slave. It's just so stupid and historically inaccurate, I couldn't watch it. The Darkest Hour, I know a lot of you people out there like it. I hated it. Churchill not sleeping, feeling stressed. They're not like us. You got to be a different kind of person who might make an order, 5,000 people die, and say, oh, well, let me keep going. Now, for good or evil, you have to be a different kind of person. And everything in Darkest Hour was silly, all right? But I won't get into all of that. But he certainly wasn't doing this business of he couldn't sleep and he's wandering the subways, and 13 Hours did the same sort of things. People who are successful welcome what we call stress. And in this book, Kelly McGonigal's book, she writes about that you have to find the meaning of stress. The press tells you that stress is killing people, but it isn't. It's people's response. And she writes about a classic study from the 1990s that was at Stanford. And what they did is they took some people who were doing heavy journalism about what they were doing each day and why they were doing it, and others who weren't. And those who were journaling what they were doing, those who were putting it into a context of what they wanted to accomplish, were much healthier, were sleeping better, had less sickness. And those who were just going through life and not putting things into a context were in much worse shape. Think about it this way. What is the most stressful thing that you can imagine? Well, I would imagine having a baby. That's got everything thrown into it, right? It's got physical discomfort. It's got concern about the future. It's got concern about, am I doing the right things? And you've got everybody telling you, just like what this pandemic is for everybody, isn't that kind of what it is for everybody who's pregnant? You know, like if you drink a cup of coffee, people are looking at you like you're killing your baby. You know, if you stay at work, there's people who are gonna tell you you're doing the wrong thing. It's a tough time. And I don't know any woman who's told me she loved childbirth, but how many women do it again? Well, why would you do something again? And why do you look back at it with such joy, really, despite knowing, you lived through it. You know how terrible and painful it was. And yet you look back at it joyfully. You cry tears of gratitude at the end because it's stress with a purpose. It's pain with a purpose. It's something that you're committed to. So once you find that calling, once you find that purpose, there isn't stress, there's challenges because everything has its purpose. Richard Nixon wrote a book I read several times called Six Crises. And Richard Nixon's book was a lot about this, about how he jumped to a new level when he had a crisis. So just some thoughts as we try to get through all of this. Now, if you want to make any comments to me, you want to say anything back to me, you can do that on LinkedIn, which this is on. You can also send me an email privately at davidcross@indispensableleadership.org. davidcross@indispensableleadership.org. I will definitely answer because I've got a little free time on my hands. So this is David Cross. Till we meet again.